Hello. We have, over the past 3 years, been living in extraordinary times. Here we are, ordinary people, trying to live lives of meaning and integrity, living in extraordinary times. It has been difficult, yet I felt the support of others, and that has given me hope. But we are tired. The pandemic demands our attention. It takes up a lot of our energy, and it is only one of the demands that is placed on us. The work we, as a Canadian Unitarian Universalist community, have typically undertaken has changed, but it continues. Finding ways to sustain our much-loved UU communities and to respond to the hurts and needs we see has been extra challenging. And I know from the conversations I've had with many of you that I'm not the only one who's tired. I'm tired, and at times I have just wanted to press pause to make it all, if only for a while, stop. But it hasn't. Our communities and our congregations have continued to change. They always have. By now, we've all heard of some of the larger effects of the pandemic, and we've seen some of them too. And those effects have found their way to Canadian Unitarian Universalism. We are currently seeing a significant turnover in our congregation's ministerial and professional leadership. Continentally, many ministers have decided to retire or make a change. Some congregations have found themselves without ministerial or religious exploration professionals. The strain of our on-again and off-again in-person services and programs has been difficult. How can you plan when you don't know what you're planning for or who you are planning with? This has been tough. I have wanted to, on more than one occasion, press pause, but we haven't. I haven't. Our focus on inclusion and truth and healing and reconciliation has seen us make a bold, if sometimes contentious, decision to add an eighth principle, requiring us to respond and to take action to address racism and systemic barriers. Dear people, let's take a breath together right now. Breathe. This is a lot, and it is important. If you, like me, love this faith tradition, if you have found it sustaining and challenging and life-affirming, you will share my commitment to keep doing what we just did. Breathe together, and then do it again. Keep doing that. In remembering that we belong to one another and that we love our communities and this larger movement, we can find ways to, if we need it, to reconnect, to recovenant, so that we can companion one another on this wild journey we are on. If we keep our hearts open and our minds curious, we'll be able to do the work together. We individually will be changed, and so too will our congregations and communities. It is, after all, the way of the world. I love Unitarian Universalism too much to hit pause for long. There are people who need us. The world needs us. I need us. The world is changing, and so must we. There is work to be done. Let us take another breath, and let us move into our future together.
There are days when you're tending the embers, when the flame flickers down to a spark, when the shadows grow long in your wilderness, when it's hard to be strong, just remember this. Keep it alive, keep it alive. The light of love, that shines inside you. Keep it alive, burning and bright. Keep it alive, keep it alive, keep it alive, keep it alive. The light of love that shines inside you. Keep it alive, burning and bright. Keep it alive, keep it alive, keep it alive, burning and bright. Keep it alive, 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 it alive. Keep it alive. Keep it alive. Keep it alive.
I think that the language we usually use around covenanting is that it's a living document, and that really needs to be upheld for the covenant to work well. You really have to treat it like it's not a set in stone rule book, but agreed terms and conditions that everyone is a part of and everyone has established, and that can be changed and altered and flow for however everyone needs it to. And it shouldn't be like some thing that's super hard to alter. Should be accessible to everyone.
Yeah, I think there's two ways that we go back to it. The first one is whenever we start a new like weekend con, or we like at my youth group, I know we always did a new one every year. So to not just grab the document and say, okay, are we still okay with this? Great, awesome, everyone sign it, we're done. But to start over. Now, oftentimes when you start over, it ends up looking pretty much the same, but you still have to think about what you're agreeing to. You still have to think about what you're putting on there a little bit. And oftentimes, because there's a lot of transition in the youth community, it's only an age range of, I think, 5 to 7 years, depending on what if you're doing junior or senior youth. But there's a lot of changing in there, and a lot of the things we talk about or the terminology we use on there, newer people may not fully understand it. And so taking that time to create a new covenant and explain all the things we're putting on it, not necessarily from scratch because it often looks the same, but to not then just take one document and use it over again, but to start over, is one really good way to remind people what the covenant is, to make changes fluidly over time as they need to change. And then the second one is creating a way for someone to feel comfortable saying when they think there was a breach of covenant, which is why the community attention box is anonymous, both for breaches of covenant, but other concerns people have throughout the weekend. They can voice that without feeling like anyone knows who said anything. And then something can change and hopefully change for the better without that person being called out specifically in any way. Because that can often sometimes be a barrier, I think, for a lot of people about speaking up or saying that you feel you're hurt in some way, is that people won't agree with you and then see you in a negative light afterwards. So that's something I really like about the community attention box. But having a process for reviewing the covenant and not just saying it's a living document, but then not have any way of people then bringing up the topic of changing it or evolving it, right? Because it doesn't really mean anything then.
Also, the other thing about covenant is that it doesn't feel like rules. It feels like they're more like aspirations that you're like living into. And kind of in that way, like at least in my experience with youth covenants, they're generally not framed in the negative. They're always like positive, like we will do this and we will try to include other people and like blah 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 blah. And they really invite you to become the best version of yourself. And sometimes people fall out of covenant, but covenant always invites you to come back into it. It doesn't try to punish you or like disgrace you for not living up to these standards. It's like a community thing that like all of us together are working towards holding this covenant together. And this is something, it's like a community agreement, like what we were talking about before, that these are all things that we want to do, and this is the type of community we want to become. And I think that's also an important aspect of covenant.
Great. So what I'm hearing is check in often, make room and ways for people to be able to speak up when it's scary, and to consider and acknowledge the different people that might be in the room at this time, that it's going to be different from next time. So to keep doing it. The community is going to change just as much as the covenant. And it's a reflection of those two things. That's what I'm hearing from all of you.
And we will care for each other as the world around us unravels, and we will tend to the spark of hope that lives within our grieving hearts. And we are here now in this present moment, lifting our voices and hearts. And we are here now, we have come together, we are tending the spark of hope. Oh, may it grow. And we will care for each other as the world around us unravels, and we will tend to the spark of hope that lives within our grieving hearts. And we are here now in this present moment, lifting our voices and hearts. And we are here now, we have come together, we are tending the spark of hope. Oh, may it grow. And we will care for each other as the world around us unravels, and we will tend to the spark of hope that lives within our grieving hearts. And we are here now in this present moment, lifting our voices and hearts. And we are here now, we have come together, we are tending the spark of hope. Oh, may it grow. And we will care for each other.
And we will care for each other as the world around us unravels. When I first heard those words in the song we just heard, my first thought was, that is exactly what covenanting through transition means. Transition often feels to me like an unraveling, whether we choose the changes or they're forced upon us. Our life unravels, maybe a little, maybe a lot, and then we're left with a whole bunch of messy yarn to figure out what to do with. Of course, we would want to take care of each other in a time like that. We covenant to take care of each other in moments like that. And then my second thought was, that sounds way easier than it is. I know I find it much easier to take care of those I love when I feel grounded. When their world is unraveling and mine is not, or not so much at least. For example, I found it much easier to support my partner through transitions, change of job, starting grad school, her parent health scares, and the like, relatively easily. And this has been a two-way street. However, when we adopted a delightfully sassy 9-year-old in 2021, both our worlds started unraveling at the same time. Our relationship, how we saw ourselves, what we thought we were knitting, which could be perhaps represented as a soft, cozy scarf with a colorful design, began unraveling. We began to reshape it into something new. It began twisting and turning into no pattern we'd ever seen before. And our yarn was joined by our kids. Her own world was also dramatically unraveling and reforming, and she was randomly pulling at strings and tying knots to try and make herself some kind of safety net. Caught in this tangle, it became a bit more difficult to take care of each other. As we were stressed out trying to figure out how to become parents, from the seemingly impossible tasks like figuring out how we are supposed to work full-time between the hours of 9:30 and 2, to the millions of tiny details that you've never thought about until you become responsible for an elementary school child overnight. My partner and I were simultaneously trying to figure out how to take care of each other and their kid when we were exhausted, pretty clueless, and under extreme stress. Every time we thought we'd figured it out for like 5 minutes, something else we'd never considered popped up. Like last February, I picked up my daughter from school one day to discover she was very upset with me. When I asked her what was up, she was like, "Don't you know what day it is?" Truthfully, it took me a moment to figure out what day it was. Monday? I hazarded. No, it's Valentine's Day. Oh, I see. Initially, I felt really relieved that I had, in an unexpected moment of planning ahead a week or so earlier, I had picked up a small stuffy and a chocolate heart for her. I tucked it into a closet and forgot about it. Feeling confident I had the solution, my number one parenting fail, I clarify, "Oh, you're upset because it's Valentine's Day." "No, you didn't get me Valentine's gifts." Still convinced I had the solution, I assured her there was a little package for her at home and we could go and get it right now. Problem solved, right? "No, you don't get it. Not for me. For the kids in my class. Everyone had gifts for the class except me." "What? What kind of gifts?" She opened her bag to show me her collection of little cards and bundles of candy and heart-shaped erasers and the like. And she said sadly, "I didn't have anything to give to them." After consulting with a few other parents, we discovered that's a thing here. There was a class list provided a few days earlier, and we later found it mushed at the bottom of her bag. This moment was a small one, and relatively easily fixed with an apology and a reminder we were new at this whole parenting thing and we didn't know, and we promised to get her some gifts for next Valentine's Day, which reminds me I should get on that. And it was one moment in an ocean of small and large moments of feeling caught off guard, of not knowing what to expect, of not knowing what to do, of feeling like I had failed. My top 10, not my finest moments in the last 3 decades easily happened in my first year with her. Of course, none of this was helped by adopting her in 2021, about halfway since this pandemic started. A time when things were constantly changing at work and in social life too. I don't need to remind you the number of times we had to pivot or try and figure out what the new normal was. or is? Can we meet in person? Can we travel? Will school be cancelled? Should we wear masks? And 1,000 of other questions for every little decision. Things that were fairly easy to plan in the past became as elusive as picking lottery numbers. Much as it is hard for my partner and I to figure out how to take care of one another when we both feel like we're unraveling, when we are going through the most stressful time in our relationship, it is way harder when everybody else is maxed out too. We know the pandemic has not been the same for everyone. Some people have been significantly impacted much more than others. Depending on where you live, what industry you work in, if you work, if you were sick, if you lost people that you were close to, if you have marginalized identities, and many more factors influence how you might have been affected. And while it's true for many people, there have been things that have been positive about the unfolding of the pandemic, including access to spaces that were previously difficult, unexpected collaborations, ability to work from home, ability to move to a preferred location, and maybe even avoiding traveling to work or family events that you didn't really want to go to. I know I'm not the only one. It's also true that almost everyone at some point has been negatively impacted, and some people continuously. Everyone has been hurt, has felt exhausted, has worried about their own or a family member's health, has wished for this to be over already. We have lost many things over the last 3 years. We have faced many transitions, and we have had little time to reflect and process what's happened. As the restrictions have been lifted in different places at different times, we have been increasingly pushed into returning as soon as possible, often in a frantic rush to return to some semblance of what we had before, though it will never be what we had before. Most of us have barely taken a beat to grieve what has been lost. We have all been a bit crispy at times. So how do we take care of one another when we are not at our best, when we are crispy? Our family therapist has frequently reminded us it's not about being perfect parents or never making mistakes. It's all about the repair, she likes to say. We are going to mess up. That is guaranteed. We will make mistakes. We will hurt one another. And we will show up and we will repair. And when we don't do that perfectly, we will repair the repair. And every time she reminds me of this, I feel like I can breathe a little bit deeper. This parenting journey has forced me to face what it means to live my values when things are difficult like no other. When I and those I love most are struggling to be their best selves at the same time. To lean on the faith, the hope that we will show up and we will repair and we will find our way. We will co-create something new, something that was unimaginable before. When I think how we could covenant with each other during these times of great transition and change in our world and in our UU movement, including the pandemic, the eighth principle work, the huge transition of religious professionals that Linda shared with us earlier, to name only some of them, I think it actually makes sense because we don't really need a covenant so much when things are going well, when we're all grounded and aware and being our best selves. We need a covenant to make space for our mistakes, our challenges, and to guide us towards repairing them. In many cases, this pandemic has shattered the illusion of our striving for perfection, our bringing our Sunday best, and that is good. So let us covenant to show up in our full humanity, Even when we are messy, even when we make mistakes, even when we may have hurt someone, knowing that it doesn't make us bad people, it makes us human. Let us covenant to show up to repair what needs to be repaired, because we believe what truly breaks a covenant is not making a mistake, but turning away, ignoring the hurt we hold or the harm we cause. Let us covenant to show up with grace and compassion, and let the love and joy that comes from this work come through. Let us covenant to show up to share our grief when our hearts are broken by the destruction of the earth, by the pain of racism and other oppressions, by the seemingly unrelentless impact of this pandemic that we once thought might only last for a few weeks, by all the things that are uncontrollable and uncontainable. Let us covenant to take care of ourselves and each other as the world around us unravels.
Your grief for what you've lost, your grief for what you've lost, holds a mirror up to where you are so bravely working. Your grief for what you've lost, your grief for what you've lost, holds a mirror up to where you are so bravely working. Your grief for what you've lost, your grief for what you've lost, holds a mirror up to where you are so bravely
Your grief for what you've lost, holds
your
a mirror up
grief
to
for
where
what
you are
you've
so
lost,
bravely
your grief for what you've lost, holds a mirror up to where you are so bravely
Your grief for what you've lost, holds
your
a mirror up
grief
to
for
where
what
you are so
you've lost,
bravely
your grief for what you've lost,
holds
holds a mirror up to where you are so bravely
Your grief for what
working.
you've lost, holds
A mirror up to where you are so bravely working. Your grief.
The collection taken today will be shared in the form of grants to those successful congregations who have submitted applications for growth projects and initiatives. Donations can be made online at the address put in the chat and shown on the screen. Some congregations may continue to do in-person collections and then send us checks, and that's okay too, though we would prefer e-transfers of any monies collected.
These old stories, give 'em to the river, watch 'em float downstream. Back to the sea, these old stories, give 'em to the river, they got no more power over me. These old stories, give 'em to the fire, watch 'em up in smoke, away they float. These old stories, give 'em to the fire, they got no more power over me. These old stories that been running the show, the record player voices that seem to think they know what's real, what's possible, what I should be. These old stories got no power over me. These old stories, give 'em to the wind, watch 'em dissipate as they float away. These old stories, give 'em to the wind, they got no more power over me. stories, give 'em to the soil, watch 'em break on down, return to the ground. These old stories, give 'em to the soil, they got no more power over me. These old stories that been running the show, the record player voices that seem to think they know what's real, what's possible, what I should be. These old stories got no power over me. These old stories, give 'em to the past. That's where they were born. Now they're outworn. These old stories, give 'em to the past. They got no more power over me. These old stories that been running the show, the record player voices that seem to think they know what's real, what's possible, what I should be. These old stories got no power over me. These old stories got no power over me. These old stories got no power over me.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in Canada. My name is Kirsten Moore. I am the Director of Lifespan Faith Development with Vancouver Unitarians. In a bit, you will be asked to create something. You may want to gather your favorite art or drawing supplies or writing material to have on hand, although you do not have to. I invite you to take some time now to reflect on your feelings around change. How do you feel when you are asked to do things differently, when those things are familiar and a source of comfort or pleasure for you? How do you feel when you are invited to co-create a new space or way of doing that honors a wide variety of people, new and seasoned, young and old, with varying resources, traditions, triggers, and comforts of their own? When you imagine this change, what happens in your body? When you imagine transition and change in your Unitarian Universalist community, what feelings arise in your chest, your throat, your heart, your shoulders, face, your limbs? Does your body feel energized or tense? Do you sense anticipation, loss, or grief? Does change affect your identity? Does it validate you? Or does it alter your role? And what brings you to life within your UU community that you want to bring with us through any change and into new collaboration? What do you want to make sure continues and is a part of this new thing that we may co-create together? While the music plays for the next 5 to 8 minutes, I invite you to take these feelings around change and create something to represent them in whatever medium you like. Drawing, writing, poetry, or prose. Arranging objects around you in a sculpture, perhaps. Dancing, moving, singing or drumming, taking a photograph, starting a collage, or simply holding the thoughts and feelings in your mind in meditation and letting them pass over and through you. How do you feel when you're asked to do things differently, when those things are familiar and a source of comfort or pleasure for you? How do you feel when you are invited to co-create a new space or way of doing that honors a wide variety of people, new and seasoned, young and old, with varying resources, traditions, triggers, and comforts of their own? What feelings and thoughts arise? What do you want to create? What do you want to let go? If you are willing to share your creation, please hold it up to your camera, or point your camera at it, or yourself. And take a moment to scroll through the Zoom frames to see our reactions to change gallery. The gifts of self we all bring to this community. The abundance we have to share. Thank you. Thank you for being on this journey.
We are always in transition. There's always something changing. I remember when I decided when the pandemic started, to let my hair grow out. It had been really short. And getting to that awkward stage that I have to turn back, this is so unfamiliar, nothing works stage. I wanted to go back to that pixie cut, but I recommitted to letting it grow, even through the rough patches. Trust the process, my hairdresser said. Okay, sure. Well, it worked, and you know what? I can always cut it. But not all change is so simple or innocuous. And even to get a commitment to a vision from a single person about something that simple, it's hard. So multiply that by a congregation, and multiply that by Unitarian Universalist individuals in a congregation. And now we need to talk about covenant. In her book, How to Lead When You Don't Know Where You're Going, it's a great book, congregational consultant Susan Beaumont, she says that rather than a simple solution, you'll be invited to stand firm in a liminal state, to learn from your mistakes and to lead despite your own confusion. Susan, she lays out steps to guide us through that neither here nor there place of liminality, holding steady and reconnecting to what she calls the soul of the institution, telling the story of its past, clarifying its purpose, and deciding what to hold on to and what to let go of. And then to emerge from this liminal space, hopefully refreshed and focused. Susan says that the leader can't manage the process, but the leader can nurture a climate of disruption, innovation, learning, and risk-taking, supporting the emergence of the new organism as it manifests. She says that the process invites us to eliminate the false divide between organizational and spiritual leadership, to engage God or Spirit more authentically in our work, and to approach our shared ministry with a greater sense of awe and joy. This requires commitment of all the people, of everyone involved, to trust and give way to the process, believing in a shared vision that is greater than any one individual's view. In fact, a vision that only one person cannot see in its entirety. It takes all of us. So the process that Susan Beaumont describes, it echoes that of the 5 transitional tasks, which I know many of us are experiencing now with interim ministries. What we do is a review of history, addressing lingering conflicts that arise, redefining a sense of purpose and identity and mission, of stewardship, of leadership structures. We reconnect to the resources and relationships outside of our own congregations. And then, hopefully, after developing a healthy and honest assessment of the congregation, then it can turn its energy towards proactive decision-making for the future. A future that everyone in the congregation understands. And even if they're not all completely in alignment, they at least agree to go forward together. This is the basic foundation of any lasting transition, any kind of change management work. We can apply the same principles to any change, but it requires the commitment of the people to work together through the whole process and towards that shared vision. So this is where covenant is so important. Our covenants of healthy relations, or our congregational covenants, or our board covenants, our group covenants, however you've gotten them written, it's all kind of the same in its function. But covenant, well, you know, the work has just been so much harder during the pandemic because it requires people to be able to come together in community, in relationship. We need to be able to create consensus around a shared vision and direction. It requires people to really be in relationship with one another. And quite often this has been fractured by the distance and by the culture of this pandemic, the trauma that we've experienced. But don't give up. We are covenantal people. Our covenants are a tool for setting guidelines and building trust that support our communities through transitional and complicated times. Our covenants are key because these, my friends, these are those times. Conflict and anxiety are in the air. People are feeling a little, my colleagues are calling it crispy. Yes, the crispiness. Have you noticed? Well, the disagreements themselves feel very, very real, and they are, not dismissing or diminishing them. They're often not the real underlying problem. We argue over words and processes, and we highlight a line in the bylaws and then wave the paper back and forth, or hold on to a Wikipedia definition to support our case that we've found to support our case, rather than exploring the underlying issue. Right? So why? Why does it matter so much? What are we reacting to? Is it a fear of change? Is it feelings of loss, or loss of a place of comfort, or of our own identity or place in a system? Is it even anger, or a sense of betrayal? Betrayal by others, or just your understanding of the place in the world? In times of change, people get anxious. That's just true. It doesn't matter what, and we don't respond well to surprise and to change. Our natural instinct is to freeze and to fight against it. But we can be open to it. We can change how we react. And we tend to retreat and protect what is familiar and safe, rather than being open to the opportunities of something new, rather than being curious and empathetic about someone else's experience. And this is what covenant calls us to. In Teresa Cooley's book, it's called Transforming Conflict, The Blessings of Congregational Turmoil. Yes, you heard me right. The blessings of congregational turmoil. She says that we're not in conflict because we've done something wrong. We're in conflict because we have something to learn. Conflict is opportunity. Being open to hear another story and understanding another point of view, whether you agree with it or not, is at the very heart of covenantal behavior, and indeed of any relationship. Teresa talks about how conflict is endemic to congregational life because, she says, congregations exist to help us find meaning and purpose. And because of that, we find it difficult to realize that not everyone shares our own understanding or approach. When we're not all on the same page about where we're going, and really, honestly, when will we ever be? We must fall back to our covenants of healthy relations to create those opportunities to learn and grow in good ways together, to create healthy boundaries about how we will act with one another in our communities, and to hold each other through those awkward growing phases as our world adapts in new and unimaginable ways. Together, we will be holding the liminal space that Susan Beaumont talked about. Unitarian Universalism is a living tradition. This is our strength, and it's also our challenge to be able to adapt and reframe and move to meet the context of the day and the calling of our future while still being true to the past and honoring our ancestors. So even when we're not all in the same place of understanding, we still move forward. We have to. And we do it as we listen and as we adapt and as we change course because we listen and can adapt. And we learn again. We learn to be guided by love and by our deepest values. Our vision and mission, these statements that we spend so much time to create and then maybe forget on the website. Vision and mission are why our congregations exist. They speak to our purpose with words like, here's the CUC one. We envision a world in which our interdependence calls us to love and justice. I'll say that again. We envision a world in which our interdependence calls us to love and justice. This is what we covenant to work towards. Our lofty aspirations that call us to put aside our individualism and serve a community of the future, one that we may not live to see ourselves. It's for the generations to come. Staying comfortably put in that place that we create for ourselves as individuals, that's never been an option. We can't stay put. Hair continues to grow, needs to be dealt with. Transitioning, it means being open to new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things, to letting go of old ways and patterns that just no longer serve us and will not serve the future that we're trying to build. We must embrace our covenants as tools to strengthen our communities as we move forward with our commitment to dismantling racism and colonialist culture in our Unitarian Universalist institutions and in our world and in ourselves. We're going deeper into the hard work of anti-racism and anti-oppression work. We renew our visions of what our congregations could become, of what they are called to become, of what our living tradition promises they can be, what they can be for the future. Culture change is hard and sometimes painful work, and we are blessed to be in community with one another in these very complex times. Let us be aware of how our words and actions may impact others, and remember that we're all one family. We're one body. So please be gentle and kind with one another. Look to our covenants and hold ourselves in those covenants. This is how we transition forward. This is how we become. I'll close with words from Rumi. Out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. Amen. And blessed be.
We got all the love, all that we need to change our world. Hallelujah. We got all the love, all that we need. Blessed be. We got all the love, all that we need to change our world. Hallelujah. We got all the love, all that we need. Blessed be. Hope. We got all the hope, all that we need to change our world. Hallelujah. We got all the hope, all that we need. Blessed be. We got all the will. We got all the will, all that we need to change our world. Hallelujah. We got all the will, all that we need. Blessed be. We got all the song. We got all the song, all that we need to change our world. Hallelujah. We got all the song, all that we need. Blessed be. We got all the love. We got all the love, all that we need to change our world. Hallelujah. We got all the love, all that we need. Blessed be.
Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm so glad you could be here. I may not say it enough. I truly appreciate you. I know I don't say it often enough. I need you. I need each one of you. My relationships with all of you and with others are essential to my understanding of myself as a Unitarian Universalist. I can't exist as a UU without you because I believe it's something we do together. We are human. We make mistakes. Our feelings get hurt. People disagree with one another. Some leave. But being UU is something we do in relationship to one another, even when things are hard. What we believe isn't what holds us together. We don't have a creed. The glue in our UU communities is found in our aspiration to be in relationship. Reverend Victoria Safford wrote about a member of a congregation she served. The woman, nearly 90, was not a fan of the minister or of most of the choices that the congregation was making. And yet Safford wrote about her time in that congregation. What I loved in her most was her commitment to that church, no matter what. Her fidelity to it, the ferocity with which she paid her pledge each year, no matter how wayward the budget or insufferable, in her humble opinion, the sermons. I think of her often when we say, this is a congregation bound not by a creed, but by covenant. Safford continues, the central question for us is not what do we believe, but more, what do we believe in? To what larger love? To what people, principles, values, and dreams shall we be committed? To whom, to what are we accountable? In a tradition so deeply steeped in individualism, it becomes a spiritual practice for each of us to ask these questions not once and for all, but again and again. Safford wrote that covenants are declarations of interdependence. Things are hard, friends. Sometimes it feels like the changes we face are relentless. Maybe they are. And I can't do it alone. None of us can. But together we are on a journey of learning and action and interdependence. I am so glad that we are doing this together. Thanks for being on the journey with us. And thanks for being here today. And for those of you who are interested in the virtual coffee hour, if you are on Zoom, you'll be invited to a breakout room. If you want to join, just say yes when you receive the invitation. If you are joining via YouTube, there will be a link to follow so that you can join us. Again, thanks so much.